All right, everyone, Gary here, and yes, I'm overdressed once again because of my daughter's dance rehearsal, and I'm just lazy. I didn't feel like changing. So anyhow, welcome to the fourth and final section that's a part of this 100% free comparison course by example, where we're going to cover our app that we covered in Vue.js and React, and now we're going to be covering in Angular. All right, so Angular is owned and maintained by Google, and aside from being JavaScript based, it's not a library, it is a framework, so it's a little bit more robust. All right, so if you're just hopping in here, you can download the project files by just dialing them, and inside of the zip, you'll see that we have a ton of different files for each of the lesson videos where there's a begin and end state, and there's also the HTML and the CSS that we're going to be pasting in. That's going to create the layout for this app. All right, so let's get started. Oh, but real quick, before we begin, make sure you check out my site, coursetro.com, where you're gonna find a bunch of courses on modern design and development. A lot are free, and the others you can access for the cost of buying me like a 6-pack each month. That's it. Now also, it probably wouldn't hurt to subscribe here on YouTube, and be sure to make sure the notifications are turned on. All right, let's get back to it. All right, so let's get started here. As with the other two, as in Vue and React, you could either choose to install your Angular project as a part of an existing project, or you can start fresh, which is what we're going to do with the help of the Angular command line interface. So first, let's go ahead and install it with npm install -g for global at angular/CLI. All right, so once it's finished, we're going to go ahead and access the CLI. And the way you do that is through simply ng. If you hit enter, it'll give you all of the options that you can do. ng-v, I believe, will give you your current version. So to start a new project, and by the way, as compared to the Vue CLI and the React CLI, Angular's command line interface has a lot of options. It's a lot more robust. So it's not just for installation. It lets you generate components, directives, pipes, and services, and all this other stuff. So we're going to start a new project by ng new, and then the name of our project. And we're going to name ours compare-angular. And we're also going to add a couple options. So you could just hit enter and it'll start your project up by default. But we're going to add two things here, two different flags. First is going to be routing. And this will set up just a routes file for us, as well as importing it into an ng module. So it just kind of saves a little bit of time for us by setting that file up. And then also we're going to specify a style and set it to, by default, I believe Angular set up, if you just didn't include this at all, to work with CSS. You could also specify SCSS or Sass. Now, because the Balma CSS framework that we're using uses Sass, I'm just going to specify Sass here. So after that, just hit enter, and I will go ahead and pause it because it does run npm install for us, so it takes a little bit longer than, say, compared to I believe Vue, you have to run npm install by default. All right, so let's go ahead and cd into it after it's been created. So compare-angular. And the way we serve it here is through ng serve. So it's going to set up a local server at localhost 4200 right here. So let's go ahead and open that up once it's done. And here we go. It looks like they just recently updated this little default landing page that the CLI generates for the project. It used to just say AppWorks over here. So they upgraded just a tad bit, but nonetheless, we're going to be removing all this stuff here in the next section. So we're going to just get started as we did with the previous two, being React and Vue, by kind of outlining how things work at a very basic fundamental level, and as well as setting up our components. All right. All right, so go ahead here. I'm using Visual Studio Code to open up the project that we just created, which is compare-angular. So sort of a similar folder structure that we had before. This is just for testing. You have to really worry about that. Node modules, because this is a Node.js based project. And then we have our source. And right here, the one file to pay attention to is index.html, which is the starting point of our app. The one thing to take note of is this app-root right here. So this right here is where the app will actually be placed in. And if we open up the app folder and go to app.component.ts, and that is for TypeScript, which is a superset of JavaScript that compiles down to JavaScript. So TypeScript gives you certain advantages over just writing plain JavaScript. You can just write JavaScript if you wish, though. All right, so if we look in our app.component.ts file, you'll see that we have a selector here, and this whole thing right here is called your component decorator. And inside of it, you basically specify a series of properties that configure this given component. So they always have a selector, and this is app.root, which corresponds to this index.html app.root right here. Okay, so going back to this file, we could also see that we have a template URL property, and this is bound to an external HTML file, which is located right here. And then as well, we have a style URLs property, which lets you specify an external SAS or CSS or SCSS file for the different, let me find it right here. By default, it's just empty for your different styles associated with this given component. All right, and then finally down here, we also have the export class app component. This is where all the logic goes. So dependency injection, defining your methods and your properties, all go right here. We can see one by default is created called title. If we go back to our app component.html, we'll see it's referenced here through interpolation as title. All right, so that's basically, a crash course of how, very rough and simplified sense of how Angular is set up to work. So let's go ahead and get started. And the first thing we're going to do is to generate some components with the CLI. So unlike the other two tools for Vue in React, the Angular CLI lets us real quickly just generate these files instead of having to manually create them for ourselves. So what we'll do is go back to our console here, and I'm going to get up another console window because I'm going to leave this ng-serve ran. And here I am inside the project folder. And before we look at this real quick, I'm going to bring back the Adobe XD mockup and prototype that we designed in the very first section of this course. And again, just to go over this, in terms of how the components are structured, we have a header here, or a navigation rather, and then we have a footer down here, and then we have inside of here a component that will show a home, and then also over here a component that will show a fact page. All right, so we could generate a component for these, for the navigation and the footer. However, if you know that they're going to be present on every page, then you don't really have to generate a component specifically for those. Instead, we're just going to place the HTML and the CSS and the coding for that inside of our app.component.ts file that we already looked at. So really that just leaves the FAQ and the home components to generate. So it looks like this. We're going to access the CLI by ng. Now we could say generate or simply G, which is shorthand for generate. You can use either or. And then component, or C for component, which is shorthand. You can use either or. And then the name of the component. So the first one we'll do is home. Hit enter. You can see it generates several files for us and also updates our app.module.ts file. And then we'll also hit the up arrow key and change this to FAQ. All right, simple enough. So let's go back to our project here real quick. All right, so now we have two folders based on the component names we generated. So FAQ and home. All right. In the next section, we're going to go ahead and get focused on tying these components together and setting up our routing. Okay, so in our source app and app-routing module file, this was generated when we added the routing syntax, or the flag rather, when we started the project with the CLI. All right, so this is really straightforward. The only thing we have to worry about is this object here contained within this array right here. And For each path that we want, we designate a component and we separate them here with commas. So the first one is going to be for a home component. So the first thing we need to do is import it up at the top. So import home component, and that's the name, by the way, if you checked inside of the home folder, and from /home and home.component.ts. Actually, we don't have to put the TS file there. Now we're going to do the same thing for the FAQ component. So this changes here to FAQ. And this right here is simply FAQ and FAQ. There we go. All right, so for this default path, we're going to leave the path there just empty. And we're going to get rid of this children property, and we're going to change this here to home component, or rather component, home component. All right, and then after that, we're going to put a comma, and we also have one for our FAQ page. Okay, so for this, it's just simply going to be FAQ, and this will be FAQ component. There, simple enough. So now let's go ahead and focus on the app component in the HTML file for a template. Now, let me go ahead and remove that. And notice we have a router outlet down here. All right, so this is where our home component and our FAQ component will be placed inside. So up here will be the header, and down here will be the footer. All right, so if we take a look at the result in the browser, make sure ng serve is being run in the console, we'll see that we have our home works. This is the home component, and this works because we set it up in the app routing file. And then if we go to /FAQ, we'll see it says FAQ works. All right, great. So let's continue on, and let's go ahead and let's go and integrate our Balma CSS framework. So back at our console, we're going to run npm install Balma and save it. All right, so once that is installed, we'll go back here, and we're going to go into a file called angularcli.json. All right, so notice we have a property here called styles, and by default, it has it set at styles.sass, which is just right down in here, right there. Just before that is when we want to load, or where we want to load, our Balma Sass file. So just above that, go ahead and type in this right here. So node modules, Balma, balma.sass. All right, so you could save that. Now we're also going to create an mq.sass file that's sitting right next, that will sit in the same folder as our styles.sass. So I'm going to create that real quick, mq.sass. And I'm simply going to paste in what we were pasting in before. We created this same file for Vue and React. And for Vue, because that was the first framework or library that we're covering of the three, I did, pretty much when it comes to the whole HTML and CSS process, I did kind of write this out by hand. Although I don't think I did this file, but all the other CSS and all that is all covered in Vue, the Vue section of this course, just for your reference if you wanted to see that instead of me just pasting this in. By the way, all the project files are here, so you can paste this in as well. You don't have to sit there and type all this out manually. But this is just for some variables here that are defined that we can have access to our custom CSS that we will write, and then some mixins here for responsive CSS. All right, so we'll save that as well. So next, let's go ahead and focus on, real quickly, the header portion of our app component. Oh, and before we focus on the header, let's go ahead to our index.html file, and just before the closing head tag, we're going to add our font awesome link rel right here, because Balma does use font awesome for the icons. All right, so let's go back to our app component.html. So here we have our header, and then we'll also have our footer. So let's focus on the header and also making it work. So I'm going to paste in from the HTML that we've been using throughout this course for the header portion of the site. So simply paste in right here, hit Control B just to give us a little bit more room. And this is what I have pasted in. So again, you can access this all from the project files, which will have, just a folder that says like just basic HTML, and you can copy this as needed and paste it. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and save that. All right, and you may have to run ngserve or stop your ngserve if you haven't yet, and rerun it. So hit Control-C-Y to stop, and then run ngserve again. And this is what yours should look like at this point. So let's also add the CSS that we have been working with as well to customize it based on our needs. So let's go back here and bring back Control-B for the sidebar. And we have our app component SAS file. So the very first thing is we're going to import our mq.sas or our media query SAS file up at the top like that. And then I'm just going to paste in the rule sets that we created back in the view section of the course here. So again, this is using the SAS styling, so there's no semicolons and all that stuff. All right, so we'll save that. And there we go. Cool. So now if it goes in, we'll see it doesn't work. So let's make it work by capturing a click event and also setting up class binding here in Angular. So to do that, let's go back to our component HTML, and we have our span class of nav hyphen toggle. So we have to do event binding and set up a click event. So the way you do that in Angular here is to wrap the event that you want to capture, which is a click, in parentheses, equals, and we're going to put in toggle nav, which is a property we will define in the component class, equals not toggle nav. All right, and then we do class binding through an ng class directive, ng class, wrap that in brackets, equals, and inside of here we put in object with is-active, which is a class that has to be added, and this is based on a Balma class. So if it's added to this, then it changes this hamburger icon menu into an X so that people can close out of it on mobile versions. And we bind it to the state of toggle nav, whether it's true or false. So if it's true, it adds is active. If it's false, it won't be added. All right, so just like this is how you close that out. And then also we're going to copy ng class, this whole thing right here, and paste it onto this div class, which is responsible for showing or hiding our menu, which has these items right here. All right, so also another thing that I pasted in is this router link right here. So the router link, these two links right here, we didn't set up pages for, so I didn't add anything. But router link is how you actually set it up. You don't use href with the path name, otherwise it won't work. So you just use router link equals and then the path. So this is our home component, and then this is our FAQ path right here. All right, good. So let's save that. We're not done yet. We have to go back to the actual app component. So Control-B sidebar, app component. And in our app component, all we have to do, let's get rid of this title, we don't need it anymore, is just create toggle nav, and we set it to false. That's it. So we'll save. We'll go back to our project, drag it in so we can see, and watch it animate, a little micro animation there with our X. And there we go. Awesome. Let's also do our footer real quick. By the way, I personally just like the coding structure. If we're comparing Angular versus React, just this right here, what it took, or the amount of coding it took just to create that click effect compared to like React, for instance. I don't know, it's just a personal preference. Definitely less coding. Okay, so let's go ahead and focus on the footer as well. So just down here is where our footer HTML is going to go. So the footer HTML, fairly simple. I'm going to copy and paste that in right here. If you want to pause and just follow along and go ahead, you can go ahead and do and type it out by hand, or just open up the project files and paste it in as well. Again, nothing really serious is happening here. There's nothing we're not capturing click events, or we're not passing in data anyhow. It's just static HTML. So when you do that, this is what it looks like. So we have our home works in FactWorks. Awesome. All right, great. So in the next section, we're going to focus on the home HTML. All right, so for our home component, the HTML that we want to create is this hero section up here, and then this section down here, which is pretty much the secondary content. All right, so let's go back here to our project, and we're going to go into our home component HTML. We'll go ahead and gut all of that. And we'll just start off with the hero section first. So I've pasted this in, and if we save it, we go back to our project. There we go, soaring to new heights, blah, blah, blah. We don't have CSS yet for this, so it's a little bit weird looking. Plus, we need to also get our clouds.jpg file in an assets folder. So right here, an assets folder is already created for us by default. So we're going to right click and reveal in Explorer. And we'll go into here. And you can download the project files and find this clouds.jpg. Make sure it's in there. Close this out. And if we go back to our project, it should show, wait, it won't show it yet because we don't have the CSS. Sorry about that. So now let's go to our home component SAS. And I'm just going to paste this in. So we're importing our media query file. We're referencing a hero class here, just making some adjustments on the font sizes based on tablet and desktop. Referencing our H2, FACOG is for a font awesome adjustment to the size of the font. And yeah, that's pretty much it. This is for padding right here. So we'll save that. There we go. So that is it so far. Great. All right, so let's also continue on and add the rest of the HTML to finish out the home component page. So off screen, I'm simply pasting real quickly, or copying rather. Now I'm going to paste this section of content right here. So we'll save that. We'll go back, and there we go. So that is the home component HTML. Awesome. All right, so we have a lot of time left here, so I'm going to just finish off by, the only remaining section is this fact page right here. So we're going to go into the fact, actually we'll start off with the component file first, because we're going to pull in data from the API like we did with Vue and React, the same exact API location. So in Vue and React, we used Axios to pull, which is HTTP client library, to pull in the data, the JSON data. For an Angular, it has a built-in library for us to use for that purpose. So at the top of the file, we're going to import two different things. We're going to import HTTP from Angular, the Angular HTTP library. And then we're also going to import a map operator from reactive extensions, which is right here. So make sure you have these two added at the top. And then inside of, or at the very top of our fact component class, we're going to have a facts property of a type array of any. And then in our constructor, we're going to pass in our HTTP, an instance of it. So private HTTP, HTTP. All right, and then inside of here, and in this constructor, this gets ran when the component loads. So we're going to reference this.http.get, and then our URL to the endpoint that we've been using throughout this course. So I'm going to paste that in. And after that, we add map, which we imported at the top, the response to response in JSON format, and then we subscribe result to this.facts equals the result, or response rather. I always say result, I don't know why I do that. All right, and then that should be enough for this section. So now we have our fact HTML, and again, this is very simple. So I'm going to paste this in with out the coding portion first so that I can describe that actual portion. So we're pasting in the HTML we already did during the view section. And right now we do have interpolation here. So the section that gets repeated for these questions and answers is from here to here. All right, so starting at this second div class in, what we do is add an asterisk ng4 equals, and we specify let fac of facts. And facts is the property that our response is mapped to. And then we reference fact.title and body right here. So if we save this and we click on our facts page, we get an error. So let's check it out. Things don't always work like you intend them to. So no provider for HTTP. All right, so that's because I forgot real quickly. If we go back here to our app module.ts, we have to import it and add it as an imports right here. All right, so the code for that, we'll split there in the middle, is import HTTP module from the Angular HTTP library. And then we'll just copy this, put a comma here, and add it as an import. So if you save, you go back and click on facts, there we go. So this is showing up off on the right because we haven't yet added the CSS to fix this no wrap issue over here. So let's go back and do that real quick. We're going to go to our SAS file for fac and just add these 3 rule sets. So flex wrap is what's going to fix that issue over there. By the way, if we go back here, we're going to have a ton of results. If you just want to limit that to 10, then the way in Angular to do that real quickly is go back to our HTML, and right here we're going to put in parentheses facts.slice 0, 10, and then we add a colon in brackets and close out that. So if we go back here, we'll now see there's only 10. And there we go. That is it. So hopefully you guys were able to learn quite a bit about the primary core differences between React, Angular, and Vue.js. Personally, my takeaway from it is I really like Angular, and that I may be partial because I started out with Angular first, so that's where I'm most comfortable. After that, I would say I like Vue.js a lot. Everything, it kind of follows a similar flow to Angular in the idea that the component structure, is very, it's separated in terms of, you have your styles, you have your component logic, and you have your template. React, I don't know. I just don't really personally prefer it. I know it's very popular, if not probably equally popular to Angular. But yeah, that's just my personal preference. So use this, I know a lot of maybe aspiring or new developers, this is probably hopefully valuable in some way so that you could say, okay, I personally like this, like Vue or whatever. So I'm going to start focusing on that. So hopefully there was value in that. So please, subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's at Design Course, and also check out my site for more courses at coursetro.com. All right, see you later.